Hello and welcome to another edition of In the Trenches podcast. I'm your host, Seth Root, and with me is my friend and co-host, Cal Davenport. Cal, how are you?
I am good. I am busy, like I know you are, and just happy to be back behind the microphone.
Yeah, it's been a while, couple weeks for both of us. I went to Washington recently, so we didn't connect for the podcast for that. And then, of course, you had your anniversary. So I grabbed our friend Chris Queen to come on the show and talk to us a little bit about, rank punditry and all that stuff. So it's been a while since we actually talked, and so I'm glad you're back. How was the anniversary week for you?
Well, it was good. We had a great time, and it was nice to relax because we just moved and getting ready for the beginning of the semester. My wife uh, teaches now. She's a professor of psychology now. So that's really awesome for her to finally start that at the end of her PhD. And I'm going to be kind of returning to school this semester, which is a new thing for me too. So we had this little window of time to get to just really get some relaxation in. So it was really good to do that. Um, but yeah, we had a couple weeks there where we didn't really do the podcast. But I'm glad that you got that episode in the can with Chris Queen. He's always a great guest to have on.
Yeah, he was a great guest. Shout out to him. It's and salute to him for being willing to come on the show. I really appreciate it in such short notice. So, it's great to have some of our resurgent friends to kind of talk to on occasion. Um, I think I want to bring this up because I think you know y- your anniversary week couldn't come at a better time since it seems like your Detroit Tigers are not doing so well. So, although my team, the LA Angels, are like one step above you guys. So we're having a tough time too. So I think it's glad that we both have been doing stuff to keep our minds off of our teams losing and tanking badly. But um, it's been a tough year for both of our teams, haven't they?
It really has. I mean, I will be honest though. I mean, since the first month of the season, I could not imagine the Tigers doing worse. Since then, I actually think since the first month they have a slightly above 500 record. Don't quote me on that. But the big thing that we your Angels swept my Tigers like last week, and I was really hoping that Miguel Cabrera would get his 500th home run off of one of the Angels pitchers, so that we could bring that up on the podcast. It ended up being against the Blue Jays this past series, but that's a historical marker. He's joining people like the former Angel Mike Trout in the 500 home run club. There, one of the only I think 28 players to do that. So even with our teams hovering right around 500, there are some pretty big things going on, and I think obviously we've talked about this before, but Shohei Ohtani is going to most likely be the MVP in the American League too. So there's some glimmers of hope there for our teams too this year.
We might not be in the playoffs, but it would definitely be a good year for Shohei Ohtani. I know you talked about that there is a bright future for the Detroit Tigers. Um, for my part, at least for my Angels, I'm a little disappointed. I thought this was at least our shot to get at least to the playoffs. Um, you know, um, After all, we have Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, um, you know, um, Shohei Ohtani. We just called up the one of the other kids. I forget their names right now, but Brandon Marsh being one of them. So I was like, maybe we can do this. We will probably won't make it and be like, Houston or the Yankees or Boston Red Sox, but maybe we can get into that shot, get into the wild card, and it's just not happening for us. So I'm a little disappointed. My expectations were just a little different. Um, but injuries and the fact that we cannot get a stellar bullpen right now is just tanking my hopes, a lot. So, but still, Shohei Ohtani is doing great. I'm loving what he's been doing. Sometime we should talk about the way the state of uh the Major League Baseball sometime because I think we've talked about this before, but um, I wish things were a little different with the Major League Baseball, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I first of all, I should say that I accidentally said Mike Trout earlier. I meant Albert Pujols, former Angel, who's I think he's in the 600 home run club, but um, one of the 28 that's over 500 homers. Um, yeah, and the same thing on the bullpen. I think that's the weakest spot on the Tigers team as well. They have some pretty good young starters and there's a few people in the lineup who can do some damage. But the future is bright because we have the number. I mean, just among many other things, we have a very good set of young prospects coming up, including the number two prospect in the MLB, Spencer Torkelson. So it's exciting to see what could be in 2 or 3 years, but I wasn't expecting playoffs this year, so even being around 500 is pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, no, there are definitely things to be happy about for both of our teams. Like you said, we're both about at 500. Um, you know, so there are some bright spots for at least for my team. I was hoping for a little more, but it is what it is. But I guess we should get to our uh topics for the day, and I want to start off with the thing that people are talking about the most on social media, and that is Afghanistan. Um, Cal, I'm sure you have heard that according to CNN, 10 Marines were killed in the attack at the Kabul International Airport, and several more were wounded. Um, and I'm sure you heard that. What were your thoughts, initial thoughts when you heard that we were attacked by the Taliban once again?
Well, I mean, it's what do we expect? Um, I mean, this entire withdrawal has been a disaster from top to bottom. The Wall Street Journal has it at 13 members that were killed, and at least 90 Afghans as well at the Kabul airport. Um, and I mean, this was predictable. Um, I think at any point, if we had withdrawn, we'd have some of this,
Right.
whether that was today or a year from now. But I can't. I can't imagine this being so badly mismanaged. And it seems like Biden has like he's decided this is the best course of action, and he's going to stick to it, regardless of the criticism. Just he's going to stay the course, kind of unapologetically, which is really tough to see as well with all the suffering going on over there.
Yeah, it's very sad to see. As you said, Joe Biden is gonna have to stick with this. I kind of wonder what this will do come 2022, but I want to set that aside for a moment. Because as you said, this was a horrendous withdrawal, and I don't know if this. I mean, like you said, I don't know if we were gonna have something like this, but that's easy to say now. Like that's easy to say now. I, I don't know. I feel like if I mean they did everything wrong. And when I mean they, I mean the leadership from Joe Biden on down to the military leaders. They did a, I mean, they even missed the basic stuff, you know. Um, and that's like shocking. I don't know what made them do this, but I I kind of even think, if they put in like did the actual effort and did this simple stuff, I don't know if we'll be where we are today. And I don't even think like if even if we did a half decent job with our withdrawal, I don't think there will be, I mean, there'll probably still be problems in Afghanistan, but when it comes to us and our withdrawal and American citizens getting killed, that wouldn't have happened. Um, I'm just I'm a little shocked by this. I mean, not shocked in that we decided to pull out, but the fact that our leaders were so incompetent to actually do even the basic stuff, like for instance, um, destroying all the equipment, not destroying all the equipment. Um, that should have been like a given. Like if we're gonna leave, we can't leave these stuff laying around for our enemies to use. We should do something about that. Um, Instead of evacuating our most secure base first, maybe we should do that last and get our people out who are more vulnerable first, and then get the people who are in the most secure base out last. Like this is just basic stuff. And I think even with like doing a half decent job, we wouldn't be in the position that we are in today. Um, and so I know, and I think, and I'm gonna lead up to this because I have a quote for you, Cal, but um, there should be some resignations because of just how incompetent our leaders are. I definitely think Joe Biden should resign, but I don't think he will. And I definitely, but if that's not feasible, then definitely one or two heads should roll, and it should start with the military leaders that we have. But Jen Psaki, the Washington press secretary, said because a lot of people like me are calling for resignations, and here's what she said today. She said, "quote This is a day where U.S. service members, 12 of them, lost their lives at the hands of terrorists. It is not a day for politics. We would expect that any American, elected or not, would stand with us in our commitment to going after and fighting and killing those terrorists wherever they live, and to honor the memory of the members. And that's what this day is for." Um, so with that, do you do you think the Biden administration has a point, or uh, to me, it seems like it's past time to uh, to give him a pass on this and just say, because it's because of these 12, this withdrawal that 12 service members died, and so therefore there should be some head rolls. But what do you think?
I mean, I can't believe that Jen Psaki said something like that because I would think under normal political circumstances, when you botch a withdrawal this badly that many people get killed in these situations, it's above politics. It comes before politics for heads to roll, for somebody to take some responsibility.
Yeah.
It's not political to say people need to resign when something like this happens. Like you take responsibility for your own administration and you get the people out of the administration who are most responsible for it. So she's got it all backwards. Like this is not a time to be defending yourself by pretending to be nonpartisan. It's time to rise above politics to actually take responsibility for what your administration has done. That's just an amazing and astounding quote from her. that she spun it that way. Look, it's we've been talking about getting out of Afghanistan since I think since Obama was running for office. He was talking about doing that back in 2008.
Well,
We've
so
had like 13 years to set this up,
right.
and I mean, it's possible that for 13 years it's all been politicization. It's been something that people want to hear. I mean, Trump talked about getting out of Afghanistan too, just like Obama did, just like Biden has. Everybody knows it's popular, and everybody knows when they look at the situation that it's very difficult to do. But what I don't understand is why the administration, they either had no idea it was going to go this badly, which tells me they're incompetent, or they knew that this was going to happen and they did it anyway, which means that they're callous. And either way, heads need to roll.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know, like uh I don't know if they're just ignorant or whatnot, but those military leaders should have known right off the bat some of these things, like easy things, needed to be done, and they weren't done before the pullout. And that's what's so infuriating, which is why, and we're gonna get to a little bit more broadly about the war of Afghanistan in just a minute. But to me, it might be incompetent, I don't know, naivete or not, but those military leaders should at least be like, okay, we need to resign. We screwed this up, and didn't do the right thing, in pulling out. Which makes me want to talk a little bit about the war of Afghanistan, um, in a broader context. you know, um, I was about, first, second grade when 9/11 happened. Cal, I don't know where you were, but I remember my mother, I just woken up. I was getting ready for school. I think I had my backpack on. I was living uh, in my own house, in a farm in Terrebonne, and I never saw my mom is a very strong woman, and I swear I never seen her act like this before. So she has the radio on, and she brought it out to the living room, which is in and of itself, she didn't do that often anyway. So that kind of showed just kind of a different situation. But I saw her with the radio, out in the living room. She was kind of kneeling, in front of the radio, and she was crying. Like I said, I never saw, and my mom is such a strong woman that I never seen her cry like this before. And being a first and second grader, with my little sister there, I was like, I didn't real I wasn't realizing what was going on, or all that. And so me being me, I was like, Mom, everything's all right. What's wrong? And it wasn't until I got to school, and instead of us having an assembly, we all went straight to our classes. And the first thing we did was we were gonna pray for our nation of what happened. And that's the moment that it hit me of, oh, something big happened. And it was later on where I saw the footage of the towers, and all that stuff at my grandparents' house, because we didn't have cable and such. So that was a big impact on me. And it was because through that experience, I was very pro, not just, I mean, our family was always pro Republican, but we were very much pro Bush at that point. And me being as I later on became more politically conscious, I was very much, and probably you too, Cal, very much for the war on terror. I wanted to take it to them. I thought that it deserved, what happened on 9/11 deserved the response. Um, and then once, like, Barack Obama got in, he really was Barack Obama trying to get us out of some of these wars. Not Afghanistan though. He did say, I think in one of those debates between him and John McCain, that we should get out of Iraq, but not Afghanistan, and try to make a difference between them. And maybe there was a good point, maybe it wasn't. I'm not going to debate that. Um, but but I still at that point I was very much for the war on terror. Um, I didn't have any like second thoughts really. And since then, I mean, I've been really hawkish. I mean, I am I take a more hawkish stance than maybe some of my Trump friends on the right. But I was really like, no, we should stay in there, fight the bad guys, blah 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 blah. I wonder if you have the same feeling too, Cal, because when I saw this withdrawal, I felt like I I kind of was like, you know what? Maybe we should have gotten out of Afghanistan a lot earlier if this is the way our military leaders are. You know, just very incompetent, didn't know what they're doing. What it just begged the question of what the heck happened, and just was I wrong? That's what I was thinking the whole time. Not necessarily my beliefs of more hawkish, being a hawk and stuff, but more so of, was I wrong to say we should stay in Afghanistan for so long? Um, because we needed to be there. I that was my thought when I saw this and what happened, and since then what's happened in Afghanistan. So I want to leave it there, but and give your thoughts on it, because this is where I stand today when it comes to Afghanistan. And I wanted your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, I think. 9/11 was definitely the first formative political experience that I had. Um, I was not really all that interested. I didn't follow current events until that happened. I would have been 13, I think, at the time. Um, and I think I was supportive of both wars. And even in retrospect, I might be I know I'm in the minority here, but I might even be in the minority in Republican, well, in conservative circles, I'll say, in saying that I think that we were right to go into both Iraq and Afghanistan. What we did when we got there, I think, is the more
It's a
interesting
harder one.
debate. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
harder question.
it really is, and I mean, so I think what a lot of people have found is that once you get involved in something like that, it's very hard to get out,
Yeah,
in a way that is like where you can hold your head high, kind of.
right.
And I think this is why. So Obama actually withdrew a lot of the military back in 2014 from Afghanistan, and then sent many back in. And
Right.
Trump talked about pulling out of Afghanistan, and then never really did. And Biden finally is the first person to actually follow through on this. And I think the reason that I think every time a president looks at the situation and realizes what's going to happen, they back away from it because they realize it's going to be a literal and a political bloodbath for them. One of the former Pentagon officials under Obama had warned less than a little over a month ago with the planned troop withdrawal that exactly this was going to happen. Like you could see that coming, like everybody else should have. My question is, I suppose, what kind of outcome were we satisfied with, and how would
Right.
we have gotten there? And I don't think that anybody is satisfied with this because it feels unfinished, for one thing, and
Right.
secondly, it feels so incompetent. I mean, there
Right.
seems to be these basic things that everybody would know that would be just basic military tactics when you're withdrawing just to make things less bad. Like if if it's inevitable that the Taliban's going to take over, that's one thing. Like if after 20 years of being there, they could take over in a few weeks, then yeah, probably we shouldn't have been continuing to put people in harm's way um, being there. But you've got to, like, when we talked for so long, even in Iraq, about that we use the term exit strategy for so long. An exit strategy to me seems to be here's how we're going to get out in a way that we're going to be okay with. That, like, with the outcome when we're gone is something that we are, that is the best we could have made it, where we followed through a process that made sense and gave us an outcome that we could live with. And I don't think there's any of that here. I don't think there's any closure with the way that this has gone down. And there certainly wasn't any confidence either. Um, and if you're in the Biden administration, you see that coming, you've got to say, okay, wait a minute. We have to switch gears here. We can't do this yet. We have to set ourselves up to actually be able to leave in the right way, if that takes another 6 months or a year or longer. And that's not what happened. And so in retrospect, I don't think, I think anybody would have been satisfied with something less than what we were sort of hoping for, whether it's sort of what I think it was Eric Erickson talked about, like keeping the fight over there, and or leaving a stable government that could withstand the Taliban or something like that.
Right.
Whether or not how much that would have been possible, I'm not sure.
Right.
But if that's unrealistic, you've got to come to the American people who wanted this withdrawal to happen and say, here's what's possible. Here's our goal. This was our goal, and this is how we went about it. And there's got to be some sort of responsibility coming from the commander in chief, and that didn't happen at all. And
Right.
it's just it's incredibly disappointing. I think it's serving to unite a whole lot of people against Biden, especially on the right. We can talk about this a little bit more later on in the episode, but it's just really a sad, kind of embarrassing day, to be honest with you, or the past couple of weeks, really.
Right, right. We'll get to the Republicans and how they might use Afghanistan in the midterms in just a second. But um I agree with you that there wasn't really a clear objective. And I know you might um uh, wince. I don't know if that's the right word, but I have a quote from Michael Anton, who wrote in the American Mind the other day. Quote, a better strategy right after 9/11 would have been to do what we did, but finish the job at Tora Bora and then leave immediately, with a note on the fridge saying, if you do anything like that again, we will come back quickly, quickly, quickly with overwhelming force, and we'll leave just as quickly. We will do that as many times as you make us. I think this seems like a clear strategy that we started at from the beginning, and then we kind of uh, I don't want to use this word, but I can't think of no other word. But then we kind of pussyfooted around there so much, and didn't really have a clear objective here. That's when we started to go astray. And I mean, and I like George Bush. I do. I think he's a good man and all that stuff. But thinking that you can uh democratize a system like you know, Afghanistan and such, maybe that's too naive, you know. um they don't really understand, they don't have a culture like ours, or even an understanding like ours, when it comes to like all men are created equal, the Declaration of Independence and all of that. So I find it hard to believe that the Afghan people would understand, to have the same understanding that we do about the equality and all that stuff. Um, you know, I, anyway, I think that is where so I agree with you, and that's where we got uh off track, so to speak. And if we just said, you know, uh we're gonna get Al Qaeda, we're gonna get Osama bin Laden, and then jump out, maybe we wouldn't be in such a quagmire that we are today. Um, I get it, hindsight being 2020 and all that, when you're in it, and you don't see that type of stuff. Um, um, but I think you're right. I think we just missed we didn't have a objective, a clear objective, and that's why we're in the position where we are today.
Right. You know, it's it almost looked from the outside like Bush's goal transformed from getting the people responsible to sort of the the Wilson the Woodrow Wilson goal of making the world safe for democracy. And
Right.
it's a little bit disconcerting how similar his foreign policy was at times to Wilson. I mean, people like Bill Buckley and George Will and others said from the beginning the idea of trying to establish a democratic government where there isn't one from the outside, uh, as an outside nation, was never a conservative goal. And
Right.
I think there's something to that. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I think Anton is onto something here. I often don't agree with him, but I think he's right here, to a degree that you, I think it was in 2012 presidential debate, or maybe it was 2016. But Mike Huckabee said something like, "The job of the military is to break things and kill people." And it was kind of like that. We're not there to um, create governments and things like that.
We're not
There's
there to give out candy like we did, to make them love us,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like for a long, actually, when you've got people stationed there long term, obviously you make friends and things like that.
right.
This has been a tactic since at least the 80s in the special forces and things like that. They've trained to get along with and build rapport with people of other countries and things like that. Like that obviously is supposed to happen. But the the idea that, I mean, it's sort of this lack of sort of conservative humility, that this way of the conservatives look at the world like there's only so much that institutions can do, and the idea that we can completely transform a culture just because we go in and invade, was never a conservative ideal. And I think that there's two options, and one of them is Anton's, which is a much more um, attractive option, which is we just go in and we cut the head off the snake as much as possible and destroy as much of the enemy as possible very quickly, and then we leave and we let them know in no uncertain terms that we'll be back to do it again if they try something. The other option is you you need total war, like you need to completely obliterate them so there's nothing left. And nobody in who is a superpower in the 21st century is comfortable with that because it
Yeah.
involves way too much collateral damage. So
Well, and
there's
optics too,
nothing,
right?
yeah, and optics, and yeah, I mean, like with the way that we understand morality of war and just war and things like that,
Right.
and human rights, the way that you would have to approach that would never stand up um,
Right.
these days, like the way that it might have, uh, a couple centuries ago, even a century ago, even just kind of seeing how World War One and World War Two were conducted. That type of thing, just it's not how we do things anymore. Even if at minimum it's just because as we don't want to put our own troops in harm's way that way, and it's absolutely understandable why we wouldn't. So that being off the table, that leaves you with the option that we went with, which was seemingly without end, and the Anton option, which I think in retrospect was the much better option. Maybe some sort of middle ground would have been help establish a stable government, forget democracy and all of that stuff. A stable government that was not supporting terrorism and that sort of thing, um, and then leave it at that and let the country evolve from there.
Right.
Um, but we didn't do that, and 20 years later, we're kind of looking back and wondering, which of the different paths that we didn't follow was the right one. But this is, I think, just the latest of episodes, and probably the most egregious and the most and one of the most memorable episodes of just taking the total wrong path. And you had a fork in the road. The Biden administration just doing this so carelessly
Yeah.
is, I think, going to be um, it, it's
It's a,
obviously going to have political repercussions, but it's also like it has repercussions more concretely
right.
for both Americans, troops, and civilians, and of course the Afghan people as well.
Well, since you mentioned it, let's get to it real quick of the political repercussions. I mean, I definitely think this is going to help Republicans in 2022. To what extent,
For
I
sure.
don't know. I mean, already I think we're going to win back the House and the Senate. So um I mean, even before Afghanistan, just historically we have seen, you know, the people who are not in the people who are not in power in the congressional branches of government seem to get back into power if there is a you know uh, opposite president or an opponent a president or whatever. So the question is, how bad is this going to be for Biden come 2022? How many seats will flip? um I don't want to make too much out of Afghanistan because we do have short memories and stuff, but at the same time this was bad. I think this is worse than the retreat when we left Vietnam. In my humble opinion, I just think that um, uh, we this is like three times worse than what happened in Vietnam, and I mean definitely social media has somewhat contributed to that, but I mean people are falling off of the planes. um we've also gone back there like 3 or 4 times since we saw people flying off of the airplane and stuff. So uh do you have any idea what would be the blowback, and how many seats will probably flip or anything like that?
Well, I don't want to venture to guess because although I think this is really bad, there can always be some unpredictable thing that could happen between now and then that could change things one way or another. But I think you're absolutely right about the social media. The amount of information that we have to keep up with, even if this wasn't worse than Vietnam, it's
Yeah,
it's easy for us to see it as worse because of the access to information and videos and tweets and all of the stuff that we have
yeah,
in real time that's going on. It's not just um, the little bit that the newspaper can print. It's everywhere all the time.
yeah,
And so I think it's hard to get away from this if you're the Biden administration, which is why I think that the best thing that they can do, ironically, is probably to take some responsibility and take some resignations right now
yeah.
to show that you've learned from your mistakes. And I just don't see that happening either. I have to say, um, the sense that I get from the Biden administration since the beginning, there's just a whole lot of arrogance from this administration, which I think is just a very odd thing. It's not something that I would have expected, but if I had to put my finger on a mood, I think that what it's been. I think that there's been sort of a, I mean, it's kind of reminds me a little bit of the, I forget exactly how Obama put this, but something about how, we won the election, you lost, kind of like suck it up, sort of. And I think that the Biden administration has been this way from the beginning, even when they've been abject failures at certain things such as this. And I don't think that looks very good for them, especially in a situation like this where screw ups have such a huge human cost.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And like I said, I don't know what the blowback, how big of this blowback will be politically for the Democrats and such. And you're right, the best thing that the Biden uh, people can do is to ask some resignations from the military leaders, or from other people within their administration. But that's not likely to happen. So I guess we're at a wait and see. Um, but so I guess we'll continue to look at this and see what's gonna come out of this when we get closer to the midterms. But with that, let's turn to our second topic. And I think you wanted to talk a little bit about where we see the conservative movement today, and all, which is a great topic to talk about. And it's always kind of like an evergreen thing. We this is something we can always talk about and think and be because we're part of the conservative movement. We made our bones in the conservative movement. I'm going to start with you, Cal, and just give me your thoughts on what where you see the conservative movement, the pulse of where it is, and all that. Its its strengths, its weakness, shortcomings, all that stuff. So, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we discussed this topic, and it was something we were checking in with leading up to the election in 2020 and then after the election in 2021. And one of the things that I've noticed is just how much things have been politics as usual, in the sense that now that we have a Democratic, a liberal administration in the White House, it really leads to a lot of unity on the right. Uh,
Right.
I mean, between the fact that um, the Biden administration it just hasn't um, it hasn't been the sort of calming, unifying centrist force that it purported to be in the campaign. It's really kind of given itself over to a lot of the impulses of the left, and then the incompetence of things like what we're seeing in Afghanistan as well is just really, I'm amazed that anybody who isn't basically a never Trump ex-conservative, like of the bulwark crowd, anybody else who is a self-labeled conservative, and I'm talking about people who are very Trump skeptical, like Jonah Goldberg and David French, like they are, you know, livid at the Biden administration. Like there is no, this unites everybody on the right. Libertarians are not too sad about the whole Afghanistan withdrawal, but everybody's got. I mean, we're talking about everything from the infrastructure plan to the PRO Act to just up and down. The Biden administration has not done much to unite people politically, and it's really pushed things further to the left, like a lot of people on the right uh, predicted, and it's really brought the right together in opposition again. And this is where the right is the most comfortable, because it's easy to criticize a lot of the things that the Biden administration has done, and rightfully so. it's right to criticize them on a lot of this stuff. And so it's a comfortable position for conservatives right now. And I think that uh, it feels a little bit like conservatism is ascendant, regardless of what you think uh, of Trump or of kind of the direction that the party is going. But people like Ron DeSantis, so I don't know, mask mandates and all of that. It feels like conservatives have the advantage. People have COVID fatigue. People have this horror over Afghanistan, just different things like that that I think are really advantageous to people on the right. And it's kind of like this is one of those rare or at least minority instances in which it's actually good to own the libs a bit and to really kind of rant about these things because there are some pretty upsetting things going on in the administration and around the country as well. So, what are your thoughts on that, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Cal, for the most part, with that this has unified, the Republican Party, the way that Joe Biden has gone about things from saying, we're gonna unify the country to being partisan, um, um, one of the most partisans, presidents we've ever had. Really damaged his credibility, along with the blunders with Afghanistan and COVID and all that. I agree. I'm going to tell, though, a little bit of the conservative movement's shortfalls. And I want to say, and I want to say it in such a way to not get it twisted, because I'll start out in 2016. I was very much against Donald Trump becoming president. I did not like the way he said things. He was very bombastic. His character, all that was very much wrong. When 2020 came around, I was sympathetic, but I didn't pull the trigger for the obvious reasons of his character and all that. But I did like some things what I did like what Donald Trump brought to the table. And what I mean by that is I like the fact that he like for a long time I think since Reagan, became president and onward, we were so focused on tax cuts and running up the GDP and seeing, saying, see, our economy is strong and blah 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 blah. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the green room, where we've ceded a lot of other stuff to the left, mainly culture, you know, and because we're so focused on the economy and on that sort of stuff, we really didn't we kind of looked around by the time Trump came along, and we said, "Gee, look at our culture. It's sick. It's perverse." And 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 I mean, again, I know we can talk about Trump in the background and all this and all that stuff, but just that stuff of him uh, making us wake up to what has happened, the reality of what has happened, the fact that Hollywood has gone totally left and um doesn't really want to cater to maybe some of the more rural Americans or whatever. The fact that um there's no space for conservatives in fiction or and in Hollywood, and those that do get try to make a space there, they get shut out immediately through cancel culture and other things. Um, and so I like that part. But, you know, I've been going to some Republican meetings, and we're stuck on Trump. And I was like, and really, like, I mean, if you really think that the election was stolen, I can't persuade you otherwise. And really, it's sort of like a moot point to me. Like, we're 6 months into the Biden presidency. There's probably more stuff we can talk about instead of what happened on that day, January 6th and all that stuff. I don't want to make make it too little of this, but seriously, I was like, we have like Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem and other great, rising stars in the Republican Party, like, and they are actually better than Trump in some ways. Yes, they may have taken some of Trump's uh, they may have been more a little Trumpian, but at the same time, they're very eloquent. They can talk. They don't have that bombastic side. I think of Ron DeSantis a lot. The way he handles the media and all that stuff is like this is in a way a little bit Trump 2.0 if Trump wasn't Trump. you know, but this is my problem with the conservative movement and with the Republican Party today. And it seems like we're always 2 years behind where we should be. Does that make sense, Cal?
Yeah, it really does. And we wouldn't be 2 years behind if we would figure out what the moment called for if we were more reflective and less reactive. I think that a lot of this is, we have to quickly tweet and own the libs instead of like take a step back and see what the big picture is. And
Right.
the big picture is there. It might be Democrats suck, or liberals suck. I mean, like I usually agree that that's the case, but it's more there's more to it than that.
Right.
And so if all we're doing is finding the easiest way to own the libs, we're really missing the opportunity to decide where a positive direction that things could go in.
Right.
I remember the last time I talked to, since you're talking about the green room, when I was talking to Samuel Gregg with the Acton Institute last time. I mean, Acton and Dr. Gregg are very pro free market, limited government, that sort of thing, in a very traditional sort of conservative or Republican sense. But we had this conversation about how somebody like Milton Friedman is an amazing economist and a really bad political philosopher. Um, and we have leaned a lot since, I mean, in the Reagan administration, we really needed to get back just the basic understanding of economics and um, free enterprise and things like that. And since then, we've been obsessed with that sort of thing, sort of a um, Friedmanite economics, which I like, but with Friedmanite political philosophical arguments, which are not really relevant to millennials and just
To the
people
issues
who
of the day.
exactly,
Because
and it's a sort of an amoral argument about things. Growth
right.
is good, prosperity is good, and that's true, but we're not giving the arguments for it that we need to.
Right.
And it's the same thing with culture as well. And I think this is where conservatives are, you know, they're more than 2 years behind. They might be 2 decades behind. There absolutely is something wrong um, with culture. And you're right. Like every show needs to have every new TV show or movie needs to have a wink and a nod about how its politics are so hip and
Yeah.
just in stride with the left these days.
Right.
And it's bad art, it's bad culture, and conservatives are right to complain about it, but we haven't done anything about it either.
Right.
It's and we're going to I think we're going to kind of get to this based on our talk leading up to our episode here, but um, we've got to positively build stuff somehow. We've got to have our if we either need to infiltrate institutions or we need to build institutions
Right.
that will allow for a different way of American culture and American life. than what we're seeing.
Yeah,
Uh, and so we're not just always on the defensive. We're not, well, it's not so much defensive, but being reactive, and
exactly.
um, it's, we need to not just be negative and criticize things, but to positively build things, and that's much harder. But
Right.
conservatism has the intellectual history to draw on for that. Um,
Y-
and so if we were aware of that, if we were um, sort of steeped in it much more, there would be a lot more to do. And I think of people like the original National Review founders or something, like how
Right.
well versed they were in political philosophy and how well they knew conservatism. And they didn't always agree, and that sort of thing. And there was a lot of, obviously there's a lot of infighting and things like that, but they were people who were much more prepared. Bill Buckley is much more prepared to build a positive conservative vision than
Right.
somebody like Ben Shapiro. Yeah,
Right.
and that's kind of where we're at here. The people who are able to articulate a positive, future-oriented conservatism, like where things should go,
Right.
are in a minority, and they're not the people who get the clicks. The people who do are the people who can quickly react with something witty. Uh, they
Right.
don't contribute a lot, and that's, I think, the problem that I've been, I think, since the beginning of this podcast, complaining about conservatives not having is that
Yeah.
ability to really build something for the future. So,
Exactly. Like, I mean, like I said, I don't want to. I'm friends with some of these people who are a little bit more Trump sympathetic, but at the same time, it's really infuriating to hear people talk about, you know, the election results and stuff, and you know, and asking even candidates who, like in my state, who may be running for state senator or whatever, asking them, do you think the election results are were fraudulent? I mean, what does that have to do with what I'm doing in Oregon, trying to help, um, people who maybe, have a drought situation like we have in Oregon. Like there's just certain time, it's weird seeing some of my friends say we need to talk about this thing. And granted, it's not like people from the Claremont Institute or anything like that. I'm not putting them in that category, but seeing some of the people, the some people from the base, I know, I understand they're frustrated. I understand all of that stuff. At the same time, I'm like, there's other issues way more potent than the fraudulent election. Critical race theory is a big thing, and I feel like at times that needs to be more of a focus point than whatever is going on with the election, results of 2020. Not saying that we should do something going forward about that. I think we would do a lot better. I mean, we'll feel, Americans will feel a lot better about the election results if there could be some sort of bipartisan thing where, um, Republicans feel like their concerns are being heard, and the Democrats have their concerns being heard, because both of them have questioned election results. And now that's becoming too commonplace. And so maybe the government needs to do something about that. Whether that's from the state governments or national government, I leave that up to the politicians to sort out. But I don't know. Like I agree with you, with some of what you're saying here, and I'm a little frustrated with it that we seem to be speaking, 6 months, ago, or like we're caught up in some of these events that happened a year ago or 6 months ago, and we haven't really gotten to the deep issues that need to get done now. Um, and so that's frustrating. And so I'll move on from this, and get to our other thing in a minute. But you made a good point about um, looking up and seeing our culture being the way it is, and not having and now we need to build, either infiltrate institutions or build new ones. I do see that there's some hope in certain areas. Um, Matthew Peterson, who is a part of the Claremont Institute, has a new, um, I don't know what you would call it, website called New Founding, trying to tell conservatives, here's some businesses or some people that you guys can support who are in the culture arena. I think that's great. You know, I think people like Titus Teixeira and Eric Madonna and what they're doing when it comes to films and film criticism, and not to mention Hannah Long. Those guys are doing great stuff in their field, and trying to uh, put a kind of like a flag and a stake in the ground and saying, you know, movies are important and we should be in the business of movies, um, and laying claim to that. I think that's a great start. There's a certain, filmmakers that we can, even though they might not be on our side, I think they're tired of the same bull crap that you see in a lot of Hollywood, that you see in like Marvel, which we'll get to in a minute, or Disney and some of their stuff, and then in the nod to say to kind of, um what's the right word, it's the, to kind of, um say, see here, look at us, we're woke, we're doing all these things, kind of like we're being hip and cool and all that, which is awful and stuff. um but there are people like, for instance, Zack Snyder, Whit Stillman. There's those guys who may not agree with us politically, but see that, some of this postmodern crap is really destroying and disgusting and stuff. So I mean, there are bright spots, but there isn't enough of us, and hopefully we'll find people who are within the conservative movement to say, we need to start taking some of these things, institutions back, or at least make new ones, as you said. But that takes time, and here's a question maybe for another day, but that question is, um, do we have the time to infiltrate, and build up these new institutions? Because it takes years. um, so I'll leave that there for now. But I think this is, some food for thought for us in a couple of episodes from now or whatever. So um, yeah, I agree where you're coming from, Cal.
Yeah, my quick answer on that, which we'll have to explore in more detail later on, is that a lot of times when conservatives create their own institutions,
Hmm.
um, they become echo chambers and they're easily labeled and caricatured. And I think of Fox News as a really good example of this. Um, if you've already decided to love Fox News or you hate it. It's not another source of information that happens to be conservative. It's like you either are all in with Fox News and you can't stand CNN and MSNBC, or you listen to MSNBC and CNN, or um, NPR, and you think that Fox News is a joke, right? Um, and so it's difficult for, I think was it John O'Sullivan who used to have that clip about that. Maybe it wasn't him. I'm trying to remember. I think it was John O'Sullivan. Sullivan's Law was institutions that aren't explicitly conservative will inevitably become liberal or something of that sort. But I think that what he didn't see, because it never happened during most of his lifetimes, that institutions that start out conservative end up becoming sort of echo chambers and silos, and they don't affect a lot of culture except for the handful of people who just become completely won over to that viewpoint. Um, and I think that that's a real shame, because there's a lot of people. You mentioned Zack Snyder, for example. I think of Christopher Nolan and um, Quentin Tarantino, and I don't know what Nolan's politics are or Snyder's politics. I think that Tarantino is semi liberal, but I mean they're all reacting against postmodernism. You can see like conservative themes in a lot of their work. I think we've talked a bit about David Foster Wallace, who was definitely an East Coast um, upper class liberal, in many ways. Coming like, but he was too smart and well read to just go along with the tropes and started questioning some of this stuff um, from an artistic perspective. And there's a lot of people out there like that, and they're not going out and beating people's heads, people beating people over the head with it, but it's showing up in their work. We talked about Orson Scott Card. I think of Dean Koontz as kind of as another person along those lines who those themes come up that are more of sort of a traditional conservative perspective on a lot of things. And there's a lot of opportunities to highlight and distribute these things without being just all about the political aspect of it and more expanding, more getting the art out to people that has these ideas in it and creating good art. I think of the Chosen TV series that's come out recently. It's just a really like on all metrics, regardless of the fact that it's about Jesus and its disciples, basically. It's a really good show. It would be regardless of the topic because of how well it's made. And that's the thing that we need to come back to is people who are conservative um, or Christian or whatever, they need to learn to produce good art and good culture first and foremost, because that's how you're going to win people over. Um, I mean, we both have had plenty of criticism, especially you, of Marvel, but there's certain things, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that they're doing very well in terms of getting, like, making their stuff popular and getting people to watch it. Um,
Right.
and conservatives need to be able to do the same thing instead of just look, it's a conservative alternative for all of you who don't like Hollywood. Makes let's start by making something good, and our ideas are going to come through in that. Like one of my favorite quotes is from C.S. Lewis, where he talks about the world doesn't need more Christian writers. He says it needs more good writers who are Christians. It's the same thing for conservatives. You got to start with really having something to say, um, having uh, having some culture to
Right.
spread,
Hmm.
and the rest of that will come with it.
We'll say this another time, but my thing is, I, I, I would agree normally with that. However, I have seen, even uh outlets who have become who haven't been explicitly, maybe they were conservative, but didn't explicitly say it, become more and more liberal. And so that's like a um uh but that's another part of the hard that's a hard part too. I agree that, if you just talk about excellence and trying to be the best you can be and not really attaching a label to it, I see the benefits of that. On the flip side, we've seen a few institutions that have become um or and people who have become, you know, kind of on our side and then totally just go the other direction. So I think both of these issues we need to be cognizant of, and maybe we'll explore that on a different episode. But it seems like we have run out of time, so we can't get to our third subject. So signing off from the trenches. See you next week.